second here. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. This is the City of San Diego Commission on Police Practices Ad Hoc Transition Planning Committee meeting of Friday, December the 3rd, 2021. Present, let me get the full screen here so I can see. Are myself, Doug Case, the chair of the committee, Brandon Hilpert, the chair of the commission, committee members Diana Dent and Patrick Anderson, our liaison with San Diegans for Justice, Kate Yavendetti from Women Occupy. We have our interim executive director, Charmaine Mosley, and we have our executive assistant, Elena Conde. Do we have anybody else that I didn't mention? Did I say Patrick Anderson? I think I did. Maybe I didn't. Did I say both Diana Dent and Patrick Anderson? I think I did. If not, they're both here.
Doug, can I just clarify again? I am not with San Diegans for Justice. I've been designated by San Diegans for Justice as their liaison.
Right, that's what I said.
You said with. I just want to be clear.
I thought I said you were with Women Occupy. So you're the liaison from San Diegans for Justice.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm gonna promote Commissioner Craper.
I was gonna say Joe should be joining shortly. So.
Okay, looks like Joe will be joining us as well. Did we receive any public comment?
No public comment received.
Okay, then we'll go over updates. Nothing new on the budget process. Staffing, are we still on track for getting our administrative aide who will be handling
yes,
complaints, coordination, and finances on by my birthday?
Yes.
December 20th. Okay, and are there anything else currently related to staffing? The deputy executive director position, Charmaine received from purchasing and contracts a list of the firms that they reached out to for bids for the executive search firm for the director of, what is her name? What is her title? Director of
program manager position.
Right, but it's the Department of what, Race and Equity for the City of San Diego?
Yes, the chief officer for the Office of the Race and Equity Department.
Okay, and also their contract, which includes their scope of work and timeline and so forth. So what I thought we could do to expedite matters is to appoint a subcommittee to put together a scope of work so that we can go out to get bids, and then the subcommittee can present it at next week's meeting, and then our executive director can proceed to get bids so we can begin the process. And so I would like 1 or 2 volunteers to work with me. It shouldn't take a lot of work because we already have the model of the one that was done for the other position. We just need to tweak it for our purposes.
You know, Doug, I'll volunteer for that because I'm going through the same process with another organization. Okay. So I've done this about 5 times over my brief brief history. But anyway, yeah, I'll be happy to work with you. Okay, great. Anybody else want to work on that? Okay, seeing none, I'll set up a meeting with Joe, and we'll draft something, and I'll send it out to the full committee prior to next week's meeting. I'll probably attach it as one of the attachments to the agenda, so you can look over it, and then we can approve it at our next meeting, and then we can begin the process of getting bids. In looking at the timeline that was used for that position, we've been overly optimistic in our timeline, but that's fine. I think we'll still be on target in terms of beginning the process according to our updated timeline. The implementation ordinance and permanent operating procedures, we did send the memo to the city council's Public Services and Land Use Committee with all the recommendations that have been approved by the commission. And so the document that this committee approved last week was approved unanimously by the full commission and was sent, I believe, yesterday to the PSNL and committee members, as well as our own legal counsel, the mayor's office, and all city council members.
It also got sent to the outside counsel that's going to be drafting it as well.
Yes, I'm sorry, I meant to mention that. Thank you. I don't think anything new on office space since last week, and nothing new on community on standing rules. Anything new on community outreach?
Not currently, thank you.
Okay. And then
Doug, I can add something on community outreach. I don't know if this comes within the purview, but Women Occupy is going to be having a community forum on January 20th. And we'll send out some more information. We've sent out a save the date announcement, and we'll send out more information about that.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you for that. I'll be attending that and helping talk about it.
Okay. And by the way, in the memo that we sent to the PSNLN, we requested that they send us a copy of the second draft of the implementation ordinance 10 days prior to its consideration by PSNLN, and hopefully they'll do that. So hopefully this committee and the full commission will have an opportunity to react to it prior to them taking action. And then on the legal counsel contract, Brandon, Charmaine, and I have a meeting with the purchasing and contracts to go over the process. It needs to be held at noon today.
Doug, I'm so sorry. Can I ask a question about that last item?
Okay.
The 10 days, the request that we get a copy 10 days before. I would just add to that equally important is clear, accurate, and open communication about timeline from the outside counsel. I think one of the kerfuffles, or one of the reasons for the kerfuffle last time, is that we were getting conflicting messages about timeline and conflicting messages about when we would receive a draft. And so that's just generally not best practice, I guess. And so if we could, the 10-day thing is great, but if we could just have clear communication from them about where, along the way, about where things stand, what that date would be, so that we can do a little preparatory work in advance, especially from my perspective, planning community events, it would be immensely helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And probably the person who needs to hear that, or people need to hear, it's either Tiffany or Henry, who haven't joined us yet. So if they do join us, we'll be sure to make that request from them. So now going back to the legal counsel contract, Charmaine, is there going to be a person from HRC on the committee?
Yes.
Okay, and are they going to be at the meeting at noon today as well?
Let me just unmute myself. Yes, they should be at the meeting. They were sent the invitation.
Okay. And so that means that we have at least one valid response to the RFP. They can't really give us any more information other than that until we go through the orientation meeting. And prior to the orientation meeting, we had to assign a confidentiality waiver and a no conflict of interest document as well. And so we'll be able to report more next week, although the process itself is fairly confidential. I think we'll be able to report, I can confirm, but we can be able to report how many bids were received. And so that's all for updates. In terms of where do we go from here, I think now we're kind of, in terms of implementation ordinance, we're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for the second draft to come forward so we can react to it. So I
thought about what else we can do in the interim. And of course, the Deputy Executive Director search is on the top of that list, as is the reviewing the contracts for the outside legal counsel. But in looking over the ordinance, there are several duties and authorities of the commission, which we can take a look at, but most of them we really can't act on until we have an implementation ordinance. And so we know that the investigation procedures are going to need to follow the implementation ordinance. And our plan is to have our outside counsel, as soon as that they are hired, to begin helping us draft the investigation timeline, so we can have a document to be ready to present as soon as the implementation ordinance is adopted. There also is the review of discipline. And I don't know we definitely are going to need to have a standard operating procedure on the review of discipline, but that may be something we can begin drafting now. My thought is that that may be something that we probably may want to leave for the new commissioners to approve, but we may want to draft something for their consideration. And then another duty of the commission is that we are required to review and evaluate the police department's compliance with federal, state, and local reporting requirements. And I don't think that requires any action by the city council for us to do. And I don't believe that it would require a meet and confer for us to begin doing that. And so I put it on the agenda to get some thoughts on how do we proceed to implement that duty? Because that is a responsibility. It's not a discretionary duty. It's a mandatory duty. And I think in the long run, the performance auditor that we're going to hire will be the individual who takes care of that in the future. But I'm wondering whether or not we ought to begin the process now. And I don't even know for sure, or I don't know, frankly, what all of the federal, state, and local reporting requirements are. So I think maybe the first step is to identify what those reporting requirements are. So maybe we can send a letter to the department to request a list of what those requirements are. Anyway, what are other people's thoughts on how we should begin the process of reviewing compliance with the federal, state, and local reporting requirements? Everybody's giving me a blank face.
One thing I will say is oops, a lot of echo. In January, we are having the police department give a recap of all the legislative issues, and some of that will cover reporting requirements. So that's something we do have coming up next month, but I think it's a great idea. I'm only concerned about the level of work, given the commissioners are already overloaded with case reviews, but I think it's a good thing for us to get started on.
Right.
I would agree with that. I would agree with Brandon. I think we need to get started on it. The more we can get ahead of this, the better off we're going to be, because we're at one point, which I predict that we're going to be very swamped. So if, I think we need to get started on it right as soon as we can, Doug.
Okay, and I see your hand, Patrick, but before I do that, Brandon, can we ask Captain Jordan to specifically include in his presentation to the commission a list of all of the reporting requirements?
Yeah, I'll ask him. If it's not already in there, I'll ask him to add it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then maybe after that, we'll have a better idea of what all that entails. I know of a couple, but I don't know I have no idea what all those requirements are. Patrick.
Yeah, I would suggest that we tie this in with the data collection function of the commission, because reporting requirements obviously include the compilation of data and the presentation of that data to these various agencies. And as I say this for two reasons. First of all, because as I discovered when I was going through data as it is released by SDPD, I discovered pretty quickly and then had to contend with the fact that it is essentially illegible for any purposes that would be of importance to this commission. And the second reason I say this is that we have now put forward various recommendations that were approved unanimously by the full commission, that data collected by the commission be used for various parts of the appointment process, the selection and appointment of new commissioners. So what that means is that the appointment of commissioners is going to rely on the legibility and availability of data, that much of which is going to come from these reports that are already mandated. So I think this is a bigger issue than just having, I do think you're absolutely right. We need to have a list of what the requirements are. I think that SDPD can provide a list, but I think we should also ask others to vet that list and make sure everything is on that list that needs to be on that list. And then I'm trying to choose my words carefully. We need to remember that the commission is now also mandated to collect some data, both from those reports and also from elsewhere. So this is a big project. I agree with Joe and Brandon. We need to get on it. And this is going to be the domain of a staff person who's compensated for this labor. And we need to make sure that the hiring for that is done properly. We need a social scientist, and I'm not a social scientist. We need a social scientist in that role, someone who knows how to work with data and has some experience interfacing with legislative issues. Yeah, so I think it's great to ask the captain for their list of what the requirements are. And then I think we need our legal analysts, maybe some legislative experts, to ensure that that's a complete, comprehensive list.
And it may be good to check with another agency, maybe another oversight agency, to compare that list with them, because we're not, the departments.
That's great. And I think we also have community members who know a lot about this. So Sue Quinn, for example, has kept very good track. I don't know how available she would be to vet that list, but she's someone we could certainly consult. Our good friend Jason, who's helped us so much, who has decades of experience with oversight. And then the Center for Policing Equity and similar organizations who are data centric would also have a good sense. I'm also forgetting the name of the faculty member in criminal justice at San Diego State, who's done a lot of work with SDPD and San Diego County Sheriff data. I was on a panel with him a while back. Charmaine, do you remember his name?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
He would know. He would know. I'll see if I can find the name, and maybe we could reach out to him to consult on this list. He would know what data is required.
I think maybe this might be something Brandon might be able to bring up to the group that he meets with frequently.
What group are we talking about?
Somebody just walked into my house. Other California
There's like a regional group and a statewide group, and I can reach out to them. I know they've been working on some other things as well, but I'll talk to them as well and see what they have.
Can we just make sure Charmaine's okay? Charmaine, are you okay?
Yeah, so my daughter just walked in.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Brandon, that would be good. And I'll also find the name of this San Diego State professor.
Okay. So maybe, Brandon, after we get the list from Captain Jordan, maybe you can share that with the statewide coalition and see if they have anything to add to that list. And to Patrick's point, that's why it's really important that we look at the implementation ordinance second draft to see, how they address the issue of providing records and how they define records and so forth, because that'll be essential to numerous functions of the commission. And perhaps we ought to look at doing the performance auditor position, begin hiring for that sooner rather than later.
I just found the person I was thinking of. His name is Joshua Channon in the School of Public Affairs. Here's his faculty page that includes his email address. He's done a lot of research, data-backed research on SDPD and other local agencies. And because his research is data-centric, he has to rely on these mandated reports. So he would have a full, I'm sure, sense, or a pretty full list or sense of what's required.
Okay. Did you put that in the chat?
I did.
Okay, so Elena, can you put that in the notes for this meeting so we can go back and refer to that? Okay. So anything else on that item?
Well, I was just looking at the timeline, and it has the performance auditor being hired in June of next year. And I think that process probably should be started sooner.
Yeah,
because this person is going to be essential for this. And I think there clearly needs to be community input on that hiring, and community input, as Patrick was suggesting, on this, which I assume is going to be a subcommittee of some sort to work on all this data stuff with the auditor and with your outside counsel and whatever other staff you're going to have working on this. It is going to be a significant piece of work.
So, and I was thinking the same thing. I guess maybe the question that I have is, in our timeline, we have both the policy analyst and the performance auditor starting at the same time. And that June date is the date in which the person would be on board. And we know that it is a process of 2 or 3 months to get the person hired. And perhaps we got to begin that process for hiring both of those positions early next year. Is there an agreement with that?
I think that's a great idea, Doug. And I was just going to volunteer, because I think there's a formal role that these various community members can play in this process. For the time being, one thing I could do, since I've been in touch with these folks, is to send an email to Professor Chenin and Sue Quinn, CPE, a few other people, and just ask 2 questions. The first question is, if you were to put together a list of mandated reporting to various public agencies that police departments must do, what is that list? What are the various reports that have to be made? And the second question, and these are just intro questions, the second question could be, what do you wish was on this list? What data do you wish was collected? Which would be useful, not for this part of what we're doing, but for the future. So since I'm in touch with these people, I could go ahead and just get their quick response to the question, to those 2 questions, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it would be. Charmaine.
So I just want us to be realistic as far as the hiring process goes. We're going to be focusing first on the program manager community engagement position. And then from what I'm hearing, the committee is thinking about moving up the process for the policy analyst and the performance auditor, which is going to take time to do as well. Is the committee, I guess, considering or thinking about also having an executive search for those two positions, because those positions are specialty positions, or will that be left up to staff, which would be myself, to cull through the resumes and to be able to work with HR?
Thoughts on that? I wasn't thinking of an executive search for those positions. I was thinking of it that the new commission would need an executive search for the general counsel, perhaps not. I don't know. But other thoughts of whether we need to do an executive search for those two positions, policy analyst and performance auditor?
It's a really good question. On one hand, I think it's ideal, but my question is, do we have the budget? Because we had to get special dispensation for this executive search firm. So, Charmaine, do you have a set? I mean, would we have to reallocate something, or?
Yes, I would have to reach out to the Department of Finance to see if these positions, previously when we, I guess, formulate the budget, put together the budget, whether or not these positions are starting at a later time than we originally wanted them to start, and then see if there's any savings from the positions. So if there's any savings from the positions, we can probably use we would probably have money for a search firm.
That would be my preference, because I mean, especially for a volunteer commission with the workload that we're drowning in right now, to bring in experts who know what they're doing. This is their job. They successfully hired for the Office of Racial Equity. These are really important jobs. So I would be in favor of doing everything we can to get that search firm to conduct the searches.
Yeah, and I think that it may be, if we did that, would be perhaps less cumbersome than the executive search for the deputy executive director, because that includes quite a bit of community engagement and so forth, whereas these positions are really more technical positions, and so we wouldn't necessarily need to do that, but we could use their networks to recruit people and their expertise in evaluating the applications. And so, Charmaine, why don't you see what our options are there? I think it would be good to do it. I don't know how often the city uses executive searches, but Patrick makes a good point in that right now we are an all volunteer commission. We only have limited staff, and it makes sense because of that to use contracted services.
And depending on when it is, if it's in the next fiscal year, we could actually put that in our budget request to City Council to factor in the executive search charges.
Yeah, but we're looking, I mean, we were looking to get it hired before the end of this executive year.
Yeah.
And then a moment ago, go ahead.
Go ahead. I guess my point is, if we think we're going to have executive search requests coming up in the future, let's put that in the budget request for next year, so we don't have to, siphon off from other line items on our budget. But yeah, it makes sense.
Yes, and in the meantime, I'll check with DOF to see if there's any savings from the delay of putting into these positions in place.
Okay.
I just have a question. Would this search also include going through NACOL?
I would say absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's a separate thing, or if that just has to be told to the search firms.
We can make sure that that's in the scope of work for the search firms to add that.
Okay. Which actually is a good point. We ought to include that in the scope of work for the deputy executive director as well. Okay, and then in terms of next steps for the committee, we've already outlined some, and so Joe and I are going to develop the proposal for the scope of work for the executive search for the deputy executive director, and we're beginning to gather information regarding the review of compliance requirements. With regard to discipline, do we want to draft a process for that? I don't think it would be that complicated of a process, or should we leave that entirely to the new commission? And thoughts on that?
Sorry, with regard to review of discipline.
Yeah, well, we're gonna need a standard operating procedure for reviewing discipline, and
I mean, I think it would be good to have a framework in place that's probably based on the one we already have, but that's kind of amped up from what we already have. So I would think if we could have a general framework in place, because the new full commission is going to be overwhelmed with everything from being trained to setting up all of these other rules and so on. So yeah, I think having some scaffolding in place would be helpful.
Okay. So yeah, and maybe we can ask our new outside counsel to assist us in that process as well. Okay. And any other steps? Of course, when the second draft of the ordinance comes out, we'll have some additional work to do then. So actually, I think we've kind of defined our next steps, unless somebody else has something else they want to add to our immediate list.
I just wanted to note quickly that Henry, I believe, is in the room. I don't know if everyone noticed that Henry has arrived.
I didn't.
So Henry, next steps for me is tied up with reviewing the next draft of the implementation ordinance. And so I wanted to draw Henry's attention to something we talked about earlier, which is the request that we get a copy 10 days in advance of it going to the PSNLN committee. And I had just amended that by saying it would also be great if we could just have an open, and I know we do now, Henry, more than we have in the past, but just clear communication in both directions about expectations, timeline, and so on, so that we don't sort of risk getting into the same kerfuffle we did last time, when it seemed like we weren't communicating very clearly with one another across agencies.
I can appreciate the request. I'd have to talk with our attorneys because of how we docket items. Typically, the items don't necessarily get shared. Well, let me say this. Typically, it's been my experience in dealing with the attorneys, the advice that comes from the attorneys is to docket the item as we docket it. We'll try to see if we can do the docketing early. Maybe that's a way to do it, but we cannot release the documents to certain parties. We have to do it as a full public release, so everyone has an opportunity to review it.
Yeah, so perhaps we can do the docketing early, and so that everybody can see it at least 10 days prior to that. And so, if you could look into that, that would be helpful, Henry.
Yeah, I'll talk to our attorneys.
And then, for your benefit, since you came on late, I'm not sure when you exactly joined us.
what we talked about prior to you joining us is that we are proceeding with an executive search firm for the deputy executive director position, which is going to be the position that's going to handle community engagement. And we're going to be putting together the scope of work to be reviewed by this committee next week. And we also are in the process of developing the list of federal, state, and local reporting requirements, because the commission now has a duty to review the department's compliance with those. And so the first step is coming up with a list of what those requirements are. And then we will determine from there the process of doing that review. And the review probably should be done by a professional. And that's why we're talking about bringing the performance auditor, who would be the person that would do that, as well as the policy analyst on board during this fiscal year. The sooner the better. And we also discussed the possibility of using executive search firms to find appropriate people for those positions, and Charmaine's looking into that. So that's kind of a summary of what we talked about before you were able to join us. And is there anything else that people want to talk about in terms of next steps?
Just if I can, as far as the executive search firms, you know, I'll defer that to Charmaine as the appointing authority, and, you know, the budgetary monitoring and working with DOF. I'd have to defer that to her to look at that. So,
right. So we were just bringing you up to date, and so that's where we, you know, our plan is for those things. And we're also looking at our initial plan was to have those positions hired in January, and so there'll be some budget savings there, which we can use for the executive search process. In terms of next meetings, I think we should meet next week and the following week, and then take some time off, because the following week would be Christmas Eve, and I don't think that would be a good time to schedule a meeting. And the following week would be a New Year's Eve, which also would not be a good time to schedule a meeting. And so,
well, not only is that New Year's Eve, it's also my birthday. December 31st. Think of me as you go out on New Year's Eve.
Okay. And so we'll have to sing happy birthday to Kate at our December 17th meeting then. And
you too, right, Doug?
Well, that's true, because my birthday will be the 20th.
That's why you brought this up. That's why you proposed singing happy birthday. Nice try.
Okay. So anything else to add to future agendas or other items and concerns?
I just want to say I'm really proud of this committee for putting forward that list of recommendations and getting it unanimously passed by the commission. Under your leadership, Doug, and with a lot of work from all of us, and a lot of input from the community, obviously Charmaine's Herculean labor, and Alina as well. That was not an easy list to put together. That took us a year of pretty grueling work at times, and hours and hours and hours of work. And I don't say that to toot our own horns. I say that to highlight the fact that when commissions like this one set themselves to a task as complex and intricate and mired in bureaucracy and so on as what we've done over the last year, we actually can get a lot done, and can get a lot of good stuff done. So I personally, and just as a member of this committee, I felt really proud to hear that that was a unanimous vote, and that list has been sent to the outside attorneys. And Doug, you've done such a great job with this committee. You're just, you're a fantastic committee chair. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Charmaine, did you send the contract for the executive search that the city used for the Office of Race and Equity to everybody on this committee, or was it just being Brandon? Or do you recall? Okay, then I will go ahead and forward that to Joe. And so Joe, if you can read that and look it over, and then you and I can have a telephone call sometime next week and work on drafting our scope of work. And seeing no other items, we will adjourn at 10:15.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.